YouTube has been one of my most formative content suppliers for years. After my elementary school years, I was much more likely to delve into a whole of weird animated YouTube videos than watch cartoons on TV or whatever. It mainly had to do with the fact that I didn't really like the ads or commercials, and it also had to do with the fact that the internet content was still kind of a wild west of sorts at the time. This was like the early years of YouTube, and there weren't really that many big channels at the time. It was like your Smosh guys and your Shane Dawson guys and whoever the hell else. But like, there weren't any big network channels like your Nickelodeons or your Cartoon Networks or things like that. Because there weren't that many big networks, there weren't really any suits telling you what you could and couldn't put on YouTube. Like, as long as it wasn't pornographic, then you could pretty much put anything on there. One of the first things I watched on YouTube was when one of my friend's older brothers came to show me this funny cartoon he really liked. It was this cute little thing about bunnies and squirrels running a lemonade stand. First, I was a bit confused. I was in 4th or 5th grade at the time, and this guy was probably in early high school. I wasn't sure why he was obsessed with a show that, on the surface, looked like it was a baby show. The little chipmunk runs out of lemonade, so she decides to make some more, being sure to be very careful cutting the lemon. To her side, a nail falls on the table, and as she looks up, the wooden sign from above her falls and scrapes her face clean off. Like, not the cartoon way of, oh, it's her head, but the eyes and the mouth is... No. There's blood splatters, and you can see the muscle tissue of this poor little animated creature that's clearly in pain. And this guy next to me was just sitting there dying laughing. I don't know if it was because of the shock of what he had just witnessed, or whether he was making fun of me and his younger brother for having such a weird reaction to it, but he just wouldn't stop laughing. That cartoon was from a YouTube series called Happy Tree Friends, an animated adult program that was specifically made for online streaming in 2007, right after YouTube's spike in popularity. The series was originally posted for this one media company, Mondo Media, and was one of a few shows that was first hosted on the channel. I began watching some of these other animations produced from the channel, and over time really began to love the studio as a whole because of the freedom it seemed to have with these animations and what they could do. These creators really had free reign of what they wanted to create, which I felt at the time like the big suits over at big cable network programs like wouldn't allow. Today I thought I would go through and look at the history of some of my favorite shows from this channel when I was growing up. I recently rewatched a lot of them on Verve.co, which is today's sponsor. Not really. I'm not famous enough for a sponsorship yet, but I really do love the service, so if you're interested, sign up anyways. They have collections of all the shows I'll talk about today, as well as some old Nickelodeon, some old Boomerang cartoons, and stuff like that. It's really cool. And Verve, if you're interested in sponsoring me, we can make more of these funny videos from my childhood bedroom. We could have a great relationship, and I could talk more about the great service that you have and the great cartoons that you can show on your channel. Now here's a little bit of history that I could find about Mondo Media itself, as I think it'll serve as a nice bit of background knowledge. Apparently Mondo started as a television production company and made a bunch of commercials for MTV under the name 10th Annual Industries. They served under that name from 1988 when they formed until 1998. They also had a hand in doing some animation work for the popular MTV show Beavis and Butthead. With this you can really see their roots in not really giving a fuck. When I knew Mondo Media was in the early 2010s, where they had already started their legacy of Happy Tree Friends and other cartoons. There's a show they hosted called Dirty Shorts, which was a live-action Q&A session with Danny Avidan, better known for his work with his band, Ninja Sex Party, and later on, the Game Grumps. Danny became the sort of face for the channel for me, even if he didn't have a lot to do with it, but I can remember times where he would answer some frequently asked questions.
We've got one more comment to discuss today. This one comes to us from Captain Jack Nasty Smacks, who asks us, do you have any new shows coming out? Jack Nasty Smacks, you unbelievable son of a bitch. I'm glad you asked.
He would also announce any schedule changes in what cartoons came out at what times. One fascinating marketing tool that they also did was they hosted pilots, much like a real TV channel. They would show off the pilot for a show, and based on viewer feedback, that's how they would decide whether to fund a project and support these shows or move them on to someone else. They were also probably based on if Mondo Media was looking to fill a slot at any place at one time. Probably a lot of demand for the slots, because this was the first real, animation conglomerate that I can think of at the time. Animation and sketch comedy were actually really lucrative YouTube videos to have in this age, based on what the YouTube viewer algorithm looked like at the time. That's a whole barrel of monkeys in itself. I don't really fully comprehend, but it's super interesting stuff anyways. All in all, the channel itself was pretty fascinating to me, and has the same idea as a television network where all the cartoons could be found in the same place, but didn't have to follow as many guidelines as to what needed to happen and what wasn't allowed. Now that I've spent so much time on what the channel itself was, let's talk about some of the shows I watched on the channel. As I mentioned earlier, this was probably the most popular property from the YouTube version of Mondo Media. The show is still popping out episodes some 15 years later, and the violence hasn't been turned down in the slightest. The show was first introduced and produced by Aubrey Ankrum, Ken Navarro, and Rode Montijo. I think that's how you say his name. The first episode of the animated hijinks of Murderous Woodland Critters actually premiered on Christmas Eve of 1999. Happy Tree Friends premiered on the Mondo Media Network, as reported by the Wikipedia page, which I'm going to assume was their website at the time. I have no idea, I couldn't find anything about it. This was 6 years before YouTube, so they probably had to premiere it like that. The show had major success, so the team kept producing episodes, and the show even had enough success to be picked up by the TV network G4, and had 39 episodes air on the channel in the late night block. After not being renewed for a second television season, the third season of the webisodes began posting on Mondo Media Network, as well as now being posted on the Mondo YouTube channel. I think this is probably where the show really exploded, as YouTube was a lot more user-friendly compared to other video streaming websites at the time. Personally, I was always kind of grossed out by Happy Tree Friends. I tried to stay as far away from it as I could. I used to have a really weak stomach for this kind of stuff, and I still kind of do. I remember watching the videos and I just really wasn't into them. I just liked that they were allowed to do it. The clips are kind of funny, I guess, if you're really into gruesome comedy, but this was enough to get me in the door for when I was younger, so I stayed connected to the channel and later found some shows that were less gruesome, but still had the same kind of charm that Happy Tree Friends had. The first Mondo creation I really liked was a show called Dick Figures. The show first premiered in 2010 and was directed, written, and voiced by Ed Scudder and Zach Keller. The show follows the weird adventures of roommates Red and Blue, two stick figures living in a cheap apartment in an animated city. Their exploits will usually start off pretty basic, such as wanting the newest video game or trying to pick up girls, but slowly devolve into madness. The episodes are pretty short, but that's what YouTube really rewarded back in those days. Since Mondo had what seemed to be a fairly laissez-faire attitude when it came to the content, the show could also get pretty dark, pretty racy, or pretty offensive really fast. Looking back at it, many of the jokes, punchlines, and views don't exactly translate well 10 years later.
It was a long time ago in ancient Japan. My country was at war, and I commanded the strength of the 10,000 hands of justice.
There's enough variety in the different episodes in the show that if one joke doesn't tickle your fancy, you're bound to find something else that will. From movie parodies to trope demolitions, I think the show really had a lot. In 2012, Scudder and Keller also worked together on Kickstarter to fund a feature-length movie, and after raising $300,000, $25 of which was mine, the duo got to work together to release a film a year later. At the time, this number was the highest funded animation project in Kickstarter history. I really enjoyed the film. It had better animation quality, more time to focus on an actual plot, and a theme composed by Ninja Sex Party. After the movie, there were a few more episodes of the show released, but after a while it stopped altogether. According to his website, Ed Scudder is working on a bunch of other projects as a writer, art director, storyboard artist, or a whole bunch of other jobs. Can't seem to find much on what happened to Zach Keller. It looks like he's been focusing on writing, but he doesn't have a Wikipedia page, and his IMDb is only a really small biography. Dick Figures was probably one of my favorite YouTube series, and I'm glad I got to follow it on its rise and fall, and I hope everyone who worked on the project is doing really great things now. This one's more of a guilty pleasure. It didn't nearly get as much airtime as Dick Figures or Happy Tree Friends, but I still thought it was pretty funny. Deep Space 69, which premiered in mid-2012, is an obvious play on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's just a parody of a serialized space show featuring Jay, a human meant to model Captain Kirk and Zap Brannigan from Futurama, and his co-captain Hamilton, the humanoid koala that is the last member of his species. Jay and Hamilton work as delivery drivers for a transport company and complete short missions every episode. Jay usually finds a way to get the missions off the rails by trying to have sex with any and every woman he sees, while Hamilton fumbles to save the crew from certain danger.
Okay, Hamilton, I'm done here.
The show had 5 seasons, and I couldn't find much history about it, like how they were acquired by Mondo or why they were canceled. What I could find was a short IMDb page for the creator of the show, Daniel Katz. Katz was the main creator of the show and later went on to write on Trip Tank for Comedy Central and Like, Share, Die, a show also produced by Mondo Media. What brought me interest in this show was the over-sexualization for everything. I thought the jokes about the male genitalia were funny when I was 14, lay off me. I did rewatch the show recently and I think some of the jokes are a bit lowbrow, but it still kind of holds up. Dick Figures and Deep Space Nine both ended around the same time in the mid-2010s. I think that this went in line with the YouTube algorithm shift around that time. Instead of favoring how many views a video got to determine ad revenue, the algorithm now encourages watch time per video. Independent animation and sketch comedy on YouTube could never survive that kind of algorithm shift. These two genres used to dominate YouTube, but with the change, they now had to compete with vlogs and Let's Play video game content that could exceed the 10 to 15 minute mark with far less work. Because of this shift, it was no longer monetarily viable to have animations or sketch comedy on the platform, and they began to die out. It was really important for me to have those adult animation introductions on YouTube in such short bursts like that. I think that because of those, it was easier for me to graduate to shows like Futurama or South Park or Family Guy, because they were so tame comparatively. I'm glad that the creators of the Mondo Media shows got to work independently and make the shows that they wanted to create, instead of having to change their content in order to get spots on broadcast networks. YouTube still is a great place for independent content, and there's some great stuff on the platform. Unfortunately, if you want to get paid and have the exposure that you used to have, it seems like there are some sacrifices that you're going to have to make. Thank you guys for watching this one. There are a ton of other series that I used to watch on Mondo Media that I didn't get to talk about, like Gundar or Batman Piderman. If you're interested, definitely check out some of these smaller independent cartoons, either here on YouTube or over on Verve. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next video that I post. You can follow me on Twitter for bad jokes and rants about stuff that doesn't matter, at Jack Callahan IV. I'll link that and all my other socials down in the description below. Leave a comment if you have any other video ideas that you're interested in me working on. I've got some stuff that I'm working on the back burner right now. I just got to do more research for them, and I want them to be a little more polished. Again, thanks for watching this one, and I'll catch you on the next one.